Tonight's regular meeting of council to order. First item of business, adoption of the agenda for the regular council meeting of February 13th, 2018 be adopted as presented. Moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Niche. Any discussion? No. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Item 3A, recommendation that the minutes of the regular council meeting of January 29th, 2018 be adopted. Moved by Councillor Cunningham, seconded by Councillor Niche. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. And item 3B, recommendation that the minutes of the committee of the whole meeting of January 29th, 2018 be received. Moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Cunningham. Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. All right, so first we have a petition from Constable Kayla Radford from the Prince Rupert Detachment regarding the Safe Place program for all LGBTQ. So please approach the microphone. This one here on the left, yeah. And welcome. So you just press the little green button there and then you're online. Yep.
Cool, all right.
And feel free to take a seat too if you want. Yeah.
I'm Constable Kayla Radford from the RCMP. I've been here for about going on now 10 months, so fairly new. When we first start, as any member, you have what's called a project, and you kind of take on a project. And this one actually sort of fell into my lap, which was really nice because one of the members that was leaving the department, he started this and he had it all laid out, and we actually were stuck on whether or not we can use a crest, the RCMP, on a sticker. And so that kind of held it up for probably a year. So I kind of walked into a nice project that was almost done, and I just did the following, like the very end of it, and it flourished in probably about a month and a half ago. We got the green light to go ahead, and what we produced were these stickers. So Safe Place it's given the name Safe Place, which literally just, if you have a sticker on your business, on the front door of your business, it gives you and everybody, every member of the community, knowing that if something happens, whether it's a crime, whether it's any type of violence, whatever it is against a person of that type of a community, the LGBTQ community, they can go and to this business, the business opens their door, and it creates a safe place for that individual until police arrive. So it doesn't take much on the business. It is literally just a door opening. They don't have to provide a lot of help except for just a safe place until the police arrive. Rupert being small, that may be 2 minutes to whatever time that we can, but it is knowing that for the community, the people of the community, that they have a safe place to go if there's a crime committed against them, that they can go and it's like a safe haven for them until we can at least arrive and address whatever it is. It's a pretty simple pledge. What I have is, this is kind of what it looks like, and I can give these out if you guys need, but all it is a participation request and a pledge saying, giving all your information so that we have the information of the business too, phone number, manager, whatever kind of a business it is. They give that, they fill it out, give it to us, whether or not it's me coming to the store and picking it up, or you guys can come to the detachment, and the business member can come and pick it up and pledge at the detachment. This can be taken away if for some reason, not that I don't honestly think it would, but for some reason if something happens and it's not, it's just a matter that we can take the pledge away if we need to, just if it's a safety issue or something. But it's been pretty cool. Honestly, we've started in, like I said, about a month and a half, and the amount of people that we've had so far with it has been amazing. The businesses that we've had and we've been able to get the interest from the city has been spectacular. And I'm sort of leading it, but most of the members, if you see them out on the streets and you want to ask questions about it, all the members know about it, and they know what it's about and what it stands for, so they'll have as much information as we can provide. So that's the pledge. My business cards are here too. If you guys have anybody that you would know that wants to participate in it, they can always just come down to the detachment. These, I said, are the stickers that get placed on the front window, or any door facing the streets or wherever gets placed on the front window, just on the outside of it. We also do have posters. So the posters range from about yay to yay. I don't have any with me here, but like I said, my information's here. I can easily on shift bring some over to whatever business there is, but that's the idea behind it. We've had an amazing interest from a small town community actually kind of coming together with this. It's been pretty cool to see. But like I said, if you guys have any questions about it, it's...
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation. So Councillor Randhawa and then Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for doing great work for our community. How people can find out, do we have any program to educate our people, our community members about this program? Like how, is there any way people will find out about this program?
So it's already on the RCMP website. A lot of it honestly has been just feet on the ground. We've had members go back and forth into almost every business so far. And people either just need a little bit more information about it, but we've honestly, it's all been word of mouth and feet on the ground. We've pumped a bunch of constables going around with the stickers. You'll notice them kind of everywhere now that you know what they look like. You'll be able to kind of pick and see, but it's mainly just feet on the ground.
Yeah, I was wondering if we have any program for the schools or college, right, to educate all the students. Okay, here's the program, guys, something like that.
Right. The high school has already taken it on. Christine Danroth is the other civilian member that has pledged to kind of take over for the school side of it. And we've already had, Charles Hayes and another elementary school. There's been a handful, and pretty much half of them have taken it on already and have signed the pledge as a whole entire school. So most of the schools either do presentations about it. We've also gone into the schools and done a big presentation.
Thank you.
On it. So.
Thanks very much. Councillor Cunningham.
Thanks for the presentation. Is this a provincial initiative?
Yeah, so we're actually the first one in all of BC to take it on, but E Division, which is BC, of the RCMP, has actually, it's a full divisional, and now I think we have another 5 cities that have actually taken it on.
So are they going to do some province-wide advertising about it? That would be a good idea.
So far, it's really only been on the RCMP website, and they've done a couple media releases, but nothing has gone. We're hoping that I don't have say in it. I wish I did, but we're only going to be in charge of Prince Rupert. E Division and headquarters and stuff is taking on the initiative down there, and how they distribute it is, I'm not 100% sure how they're going to do it, but we're just in charge of Rupert.
Okay, we also have a community channel on TV that you might be able to put it on so people can see that.
Yeah, so for the RCMP, media liaison, he's going to be in charge of the whole media side of it, and he's well aware. We've done that, and we've done the newspaper.
Great idea.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is there any further questions? Oh, well, again, thanks very much for your presentation. It's great that Prince Rupert's pioneering such a great initiative, and I think it would be great if you could just leave your information with the corporate administrator, and then also a couple of stickers as well for City Hall would be great. Yeah, thanks very much.
Councillor, I was wondering if I could ask one question.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, go ahead, Councillor Thorkelson.
I'm just wondering if you could maybe leave our communications person with the information that if a business wanted to acquire a sticker and sign the pledge, who they can call and how they should contact the RCMP in order to do those things.
Will do. Great. Thanks to Councillor Thorkelson. All right. With that, moving on to item 4B, another petition from Chris Lightfoot, organizer of Complete Streets for Prince Rupert, regarding the intersection improvement project. Welcome. I believe it's just saved on the desktop here. So you can just hit the green button on your microphone there, and yeah, that'd be great. The floor is yours.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Chris Lightfoot, organizer for Complete Streets for Prince Rupert. Complete Streets are streets which are designed for people of all ages, abilities, and modes of travel. To begin with, I'd like to discuss the item is our intersection improvement project. First of all, we're just not asking for money. So put that on the floor right there to assuage anyone's concern at the beginning. The intersection improvement project, we would like permission to trial a low-cost, short-term modification to one intersection in Prince Rupert for the purpose of increasing safety at that site. Well, why? We know that in 2017 there were 7 crashes at intersections involving pedestrians, and that according to a poll conducted by the Northern View, 84% of Rupertites feel unsafe at crosswalks. We would like to trial curb extensions. Another name they go by as bulb outs or neck downs. Curb extensions, like the example seen in this photograph, reduce pedestrian exposure to vehicles by narrowing the distance by which pedestrians need to cross on foot. And the bulb out or the curb extension takes over space which is normally not permitted for parking at street corners and extends the sidewalk approximately the width of a parking lane. What this does is it reduces the width of the pedestrians need to cross, and it improves visibility for pedestrians and drivers. Also, the narrow turning, the tighter turning radii encourages slower turning speeds. A study has shown that on a site, yielding behavior improves by approximately 40% on sites with curb extensions, and that in general, modifying the built environment is a highly effective technique for reducing pedestrian-related crashes. So, based on community feedback of a dozen or so potential sites around Prince Rupert, we narrowed it down to 3 options, which I'll present here. So option 1 is at First Avenue West and McBride Street, and the photograph is of a mock-up of what might possibly be the curb extension. So short term for this, we considered the timing being a single day, and during a high-profile event such as Cow Bay Days, Canada Day, or Seafest, and we would make the curb extension with pavement tape, sidewalk chalk, and removable bollards. These would be drop-down orange reflective posts. The pros for this intersection is that it's frequented by many children. Mariners Park is close by. There's a gymnastics studio in the museum. And this sidewalk goes towards, you can take it to Safeway and the businesses there. The next one is, our second option is 3rd Avenue West and 3rd Street. This short term, it could be timed for 2 weeks. This would enable more people to experience the intersection compared to having it there for just a single day, for example, with dates to be determined. How the same measures: tape, paint, and fixed bollards. The extended duration of the trial of 2 weeks would mean that we need to fix these bollards to the ground somehow. The pros that, if it's there for longer, we'd have more opportunity to receive feedback from the community. This is a popular crossing downtown for the bank, City Hall, the bargain store, etc. And with the paint, it's an opportunity to also showcase local arts and culture for street beautification. However, cons might be that a longer trial requires professional installation of the bollards. Our third option, due to demand by the public, we thought about 2nd Avenue West and 3rd Street. For timing, we considered a 1-month trial of this to just really make sure that this is something that the city would like to experience. We would get a lot of feedback from this. Could be a 1-month, dates to be determined. Same methods: tape, paint, fixed removable bollards with artistic interpretation of the paint to make it beautiful. Pros, well, we conducted a survey online and in person, and we found with over 200 respondents, roughly 80% of people wanted some improvement to this intersection. This is a very busy crossing downtown. It was at the site of one of the crashes of 2017. However, the difficulty is that this requires the Ministry of Transportation Infrastructure permission, and recently speaking with a representative from the highways, that this is not an option according to the province to trial this sort of thing. So it unfortunately rules this location out. There are many ways that the project could be evaluated. For example, before and after surveys might be measuring the time spent by pedestrians crossing the street before versus afterwards. For example, you get a stopwatch. How many seconds does it take on average to cross the street before and after? We could measure yielding behavior of automobiles. How many cars pass by a pedestrian who's waiting to stop at the who's waiting to cross the intersection before compared to after the intervention. Vehicle speeds could be measured, and also qualitatively feedback from road users by forms available online or in person at the site of the intervention. Funding, CS4PR, that's Complete Streets for Prince Rupert, intends to fundraise the cost of installation and cleanup through grants and donations. We've been speaking with potential funders and supporters up to this time. So what we are requesting from the city, however, is permission to trial such an intervention on one intersection and a recommendation of which site that might be. Number 3, assistance negotiating with the Ministry of Transportation. That may not be a factor if it's on municipal street. We'd also request technical assistance relating to curb extension geometries. For example, how many meters is appropriate to extend the curb and whatnot. Preferred materials and signage. Is there a preference for the color of the tape, or what kind of signs do road users need to be warned of this intersection? Also, after that, after a location is determined and materials are sorted out, cost estimate from the city so that we can have a more concrete number behind our funding requests. We'd also like what you consider would be reasonable criteria for success. So does this work or not? Is this a successful thing? I'd like to talk with you about that. And considering that interventions made of plastic are temporary, any car can drive over a plastic bollard. What other cities have done have made it something more permanent. For example, on the picture on the right, St. Louis, concrete balls into the intersection, creating these curb extensions. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I know it's quite a timely issue with the number of recent collisions with pedestrians.
Yes,
so,
unfortunately.
yeah, I'd like to ask if there's any questions for Mr. Lightfoot. Councillor Randawa?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So who will be installing and take down? Who will be responsible for that?
Sorry, if you just hit your microphone again there.
Volunteers for Complete Streets for Prince Rupert will be the ones, if it's a single day, for a single day, if it's a drop-down bollard that requires no installation, affixing to the cement with permission of city volunteers from Complete Streets for Prince Rupert, will be measuring the tape, installing the paint based on specifications from city engineers, and dropping down the pylons. For an extended term, we would like a professional installation, and this might come from city workers, and the cost of this installation would be, the cost of the professional installation would be reflected in the grant proposal.
Thank you. And do you have any talk with ICBC if they want partner in this, because this one is great for our community, I think?
I have not been in touch with ICBC. However, I do know that ICBC does fund infrastructure projects that improve safety for pedestrians and all road users. One example off the top of my head is the Burrard Street and Pacific Avenue intersection in downtown Vancouver. That's a good avenue to explore. Thank you.
All right, Councillor Kinney and then Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Have you spoke to the RCMP with regards to this, if it would interfere with anything?
I have not spoken to the RCMP with regards to whether or not it would interfere with their services. However, I have been in touch informally with some constables, and they said it would, let's see, I'm hesitant to speak on behalf of the RCMP. However, yeah, what I can tell you is that they would be happy to tell you their opinions if you contact them directly. Yeah, I haven't heard anything negative.
The reason I'm asking that is I see on one picture there with the bank and the post office, etc. You have a turn going this way right by the bank. That would be crossing over from coming up.
Okay.
Light.
Okay. Yeah, we can explore that. If this is something that we're concerned about, we can explore that with the RCMP. How I have discussed the project with the fire chief, and he said that there was nothing that would be impeding the fire department from carrying out their services in case of an emergency at such of these intersections.
Thank you.
Councillor Cunningham.
I love the idea of bump outs. I'm not too sure if I like the idea of temporary ones. A plastic bollard to me, is going to give a false sense of security to a pedestrian. If a car cuts the corner, there's no ramifications to the car if it knocks over a plastic bollard versus something permanent. I think it's a great way to go, Chris, but I'm just really hesitant about something temporary because, all it takes is a person that's maybe a new driver and cuts that corner just a little bit too close. And, if they're going to go, there's not a curve to jump over or something that's going to stop that car. And so I love bump outs. So I've seen them in Europe and that, and they're fantastic. But I just don't know about temporary ones because I know I've been standing on the curb when the cars come up over the curb, never mind something that's plastic and they're not even going to worry about. But we do definitely have to do something, and I think 3rd Avenue is where most of the incidents have been, and that's been the highway, and we've talked to them and they're looking into it and studying it. What they can do, I don't know. It's all about, at the end of the day, people's safety. I don't care what it costs, but it's people's safety, and it's a 50-50 thing. People stepping off the curb have to make sure that the traffic's going to stop. Like if you see a truck coming at 50 kilometers an hour and he's on the other side of the intersection, well, it's not a good idea to step out in front of him. But at the same time, drivers have to be aware once somebody's in that crosswalk that they have to slow down and stop. And I've been stopped to let somebody go by and a person in the inside lane goes by me. I think part of it's enforcement as well, and already our detachment's stretched pretty thin, but I've asked the Department of Highways if they could put some pressure on the traffic division in Terrace to come down here a little more often and help our detachment out and things like that. And I think when people are aware that, hey, if I go through that crosswalk and somebody's in it, it's going to cost me a couple $100, people are going to start paying a little more attention. It's amazing how people sit up when their wallet starts getting thin. But yeah, I like your presentation, and I think something's got to be done. So we'll see what happens.
Councillor Niche. Sorry, Councillor Thorkelson, I'll get you after Councillor Niche here.
Thank you for your presentation. I definitely think there needs to be something done. But I think, working with our city engineers and trying to come up with a plan, maybe something that's not so, not just a paint. Paint around here seems to wash away pretty quick. So, and I think, we may need to work with something a little bit more permanent, whether it be bumped out curbs or whatever. But I do think that, if you with this information to our engineers, and maybe we can start looking into doing something. I think something does need to be done.
Right, Councillor Thorkelson?
Sorry, I've seen the, I think those temporary bollards, I was trying to remember what it was, but I think it was in Portland, and I was, and cars seem to abide by those very well. I'm just wondering, I want to wonder one question, is that if we're looking at 2nd Avenue, that is a highway, and I don't know what our authority is over it. Maybe Mr. Long can explain that. And then the other point is that when we did redesign Prince Rupert, we were certainly looking at those some of those same concepts for 3rd Avenue.
Mr. Long, would you just like to speak briefly on the jurisdiction of 2nd Avenue?
Yeah, 2nd Avenue is a provincial highway. I think Mr. Mr. Lightfoot already indicated that they are not interested in doing anything on 2nd Avenue at this point.
Right, are there any further questions for Mr. Lightfoot? Right, if not, I'd like to say thanks very much for your presentation. I think moving forward, obviously with the Ministry of Transportation not being willing to entertain, I think we look to 3rd Avenue. Ultimately, the city is going to be liable for any design changes. So I would recommend that you provide this presentation to staff. We'll refer you to our engineering department and connect you in there, and we'll consider then how we might be able to move forward from here.
Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for your presentation. So moving on to item 6A, report from the city manager regarding the appointment of election officers.
The report is straightforward.
So the recommendation is that Corinne Bombin, Chief Financial Officer, be appointed Chief Elections Officer, and that Mr. Antonio Vera, Deputy Corporate Administrator, be appointed as Deputy Elections Officer for the 2018 General Municipal Election. Moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Cunningham. Any discussion? I can't believe 4 years went that fast.
Yep.
Okay, question's been called. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried.
Congratulations.
Item 6B, report from the city planner regarding application for development variance permit at 144 9th Avenue East. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This development variance permit application is for the property located at 144 9th Avenue East for the purposes of building a garage. The application is to vary the front property setbacks from 3.6 meters to 2.4 meters. The Prince Rupert zoning bylaw allows for the request for variances to the front yard setbacks for the purpose of accommodating garages. And then within the immediate neighborhood, there are a number of non-conforming buildings of such nature. Therefore, the proposed garage is not deemed to significantly negatively impact the neighboring residents nor forming character of the street, as well as the proposed project could provide desirable improvements for the off-street parking. The applicant requires approval to proceed to public notification.
Thanks very much for your presentation. Any questions? Moved by Councillor Niche, seconded by Councillor Randhawa. Any questions? Seeing none, I'd call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thanks very much.
Yep.
So moving on to item A, resolution from closed meetings. I'll just read two of them out here. So first, on January 15th, 2018, at Council's closed meeting, the following resolutions were made. Regarding tsunami risk assessment and the award of contract, it was moved by Councillor Randhawa and seconded by Councillor Moreau that Mayor and Council approve the recommendation of the Fire Chief and award the tsunami risk assessment project to Northwest Hydraulic Consultants. And second, it was moved by Councillor Randhawa and seconded by Councillor Moreau that Council appoint Mr. Roy Henry Vickers for a 2-year term to the board. So, Moving on, item 9A, report from the city planner regarding housing agreement bylaw number 3424-2018, being a bylaw to adopt a housing agreement for the support of housing at 333 11th East.
The proposed supportive housing project at 3311th Avenue East requires a housing agreement to assure operating requirements and conditions are met. The proposed supportive housing also requires a City of Prince Rupert zoning bylaw amendment. This process has commenced, has reached the first reading, and the applicant has held a successful information meeting. That was sometime late last month. Before proceeding with the amending process, and since the applicant has agreed to the housing agreement, it has to be adopted by a bylaw. In other words, housing agreement has to be adopted by council and register entitled before council gives the land use amending bylaw the final consideration. The details of the requirements and conditions are included in a housing agreement, which is Schedule A to the proposed bylaw. In brief, the property must be kept in good order and residents do not engage in any conduct or behavior that unreasonably disturbs the neighborhood. In other words, conditions of use and conditions of residency. The housing agreement and therefore the use, supportive housing, can be terminated if the owner fails to comply with the terms and conditions of the housing agreement. In conclusion, the housing agreement will safeguard the proper use of the subject property and provides a mechanism for termination in case of any failure to comply. And that concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Is there any questions? Moved by Councillor Neat, or sorry, you have a question? Okay.
I just kind of find it putting the cart before the horse here with making an agreement like this and accepting an agreement before we haven't even gone to a public hearing yet. I mean, I guess, I don't know if it's because of timing or what, but to me, it seems like, you know, by us approving an agreement with somebody when we haven't even decided whether or not this is going to even happen, seems to be kind of backwards. So can you explain your logic on that?
Well, it's not my logic, it's the legislation logic. The legislation requires the housing agreement to be agreed prior to completing the rezoning for the purposes of not having a time period within which housing agreement doesn't exist. So it's kind of maybe counterintuitive, but it's necessary to go through this step. And so essentially, this document that will have to be signed, agreed upon, and registered on title before we proceed to public hearing.
Are there any further questions?
I just had a comment. It's sort of peripheral to this, but Mr. Krakic, I was wondering when I missed the council meeting and I was unable to call in. When we were talking about the rezoning for supportive housing, and I wanted to make sure that supportive housing zoning would encompass the supportive housing that we're talking about getting from the provincial government as well, to make sure that we don't have to do this over again. But other than that, I'm fully in support of this housing agreement. I think the more supportive housing we have in Prince Rupert, the better off we are.
So with respect to the kind of supportive housing that this specific bylaw is dealing with is to do with things that are in a Community Living Act. So the type of housing, for example, that may be provided through facilities such as a transition house, let's say, for example, the units that have been talked about for the emergency housing, that would be simply accommodated through our residential zone. This is specifically for situations where we want to allow supportive housing in residential areas, but we want to safeguard that the residential areas remain unfettered. Does that answer your question, Councilor Torkelson?
Yeah, so is the zoning more, is it more, are we going to, if we had another one of these houses, would we use the same zoning, or would we have to have another zoning bylaw?
No, we would use the same zoning.
So it's more for a facility that is, the zoning would be more for a facility where it's a house that is converted into a supportive housing group home kind of a thing.
Exactly. The key word is supportive and community living act. So, for example, if you it doesn't include halfway houses for those who may be released from prison and going to to re-enter into the community. That wouldn't be permitted under this zoning. This would be for drug and alcohol use. For example, some years ago I had a question about palliative care, and I had a question about a dietary rehabilitation where clients would be spending a number of weeks or months relearning healthy living. Those would be type of uses that would be encompassed under this new zone.
And would each one of those have to have a housing agreement similar to this, or maybe not that similar, but would have to have a housing agreement with the city?
Yeah, I would recommend that each one of those has a housing agreement. Again, what we want to do is we want to assure that the neighborhood does not change its profile, that the appearance of the house does not stick out, that it blends into the neighborhood, and if there are any behaviors that are out of the norm, of course, this agreement, unlike the covenant, has a mechanism by which we can cancel it.
Right. So then back to Councillor Nietzsche's question: is it if once we pass the bylaw, the zoning bylaw, then it still can apply to other housing agreements? Because I was wondering, it sounded like we had to pass this housing agreement before we could pass the bylaw. So I was just wondering, once we pass the bylaw, if we could not cover another house under this bylaw, if we would have a bunch of new zoning bylaws being passed if we had more houses under housing agreements.
Unfortunately, each separate situation would require a new bylaw. So if you look at under the bylaw, the agreement is a schedule to the bylaw, and that schedule would change with different uses. The words would change in terms of what conditions are placed upon it and what restrictions are placed on it. So essentially, if we have tomorrow somebody applying for the similar house at the other end of Prince Rupert, we would go through exactly the same process.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Councillor Cunningham?
Mr. Krecken, can you tell me the difference between a group home and a supportive house? If somebody wants to start a group home, do they have to get a zoning bylaw too?
Well, they have to define what the group home is for. For example, we have boarding houses, which is boarding house. But group home, for example, can you give me, for example?
Well, handicapped kids?
Yeah. Yes. This would be covered under this bylaw. No, under Community Living Act, if it's below 6, then you can just set up your operations regardless. If it's over 6, then you fall under this bylaw.
So under 6, you don't have to have a bylaw?
Under 6, you can just start your operations.
All right, are there any further questions? Seeing none, I'd entertain the motion. The recommendation is that Mayor and Council give first, second, and third readings to the Housing Agreement Bylaw number 3424, 2018. Moved by Councillor Kinney, seconded by Councillor Niche. If there's no final discussion, I call the question. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thanks very much.
Yep.
So last on the agenda, any reports, questions, or inquiries from members of council? Councillor Cunningham?
I've been approached by a few people in the community about whether the front door is going to be a permanent fixture at City Hall or it was just a temporary thing. So I thought I'd ask at a meeting so they can hear.
Sure, yeah, it's a permanent arrangement. We needed to manage that all the people coming into City Hall for safety reasons need to be managed through one particular location. So we will always encourage the side door because it also is wheelchair accessible.
Councillor Randhawa?
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I have a few people approached me, like asking, like if city can write down a letter to ICBC to ask them to schedule a like weekly or sometime an adjuster from terrace come here so they can talk face by face. We used to have office here, but now they move everything to terrace so you can talk only on phone. So people feel like they can talk face by face, so if they can schedule one guy here.
I think we could refer that to staff because I understand ICBC is going through quite a major overhaul, so we can see if there's any potential through that process. Are there any other reports, questions? If not, I just want to extend regrets from the mayor. Obviously, if you people at home or in the audience can't tell by now, based on my lack of beard, I'm not Mayor Lee Brain. He's in Alaska meeting with a series of his counterparts in Southeast Alaska, so he sends his regrets tonight. So seeing no final words, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Randhawa, seconded by Councillor Niche. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Meeting adjourned. Have a good night, everyone.
Night, Joy.